Good morning, Australia.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much again for taking the time to join us at PBS Together today. We are super excited to have Dr. Russ Fox, and he is like super passionate not only about behavioural science, but supporting teachers and schools to implement successful and sustainable strategies that really make a difference for all of our kids in schools. And so part of Russ's like research area is all about teacher professional development and looking at how to looking at implementations on a system level to really ensure that the school is successful in reaching their goal of not only educating kids, but doing it in a way that their well-being is taken care of as well. And also the teacher's well-being, right? Because it's a tough job. And so Russ has been a teacher in the past in another life. And now is a lecturer at Monash at the Masters of Applied Behaviour Analysis. So welcome, Russ. Super excited. We just want to kind of remind everyone of a couple of really cool things that are coming up at PBS Together. Firstly, we've got a boot camp, another boot camp scheduled to kick off in April, and we've got a 50% discount. So please, jump in and get your discount while it's there. Go to our website and join us for that. We've already got a long wait list, so it's really exciting. We've also got a 30% discount on a course of Introduction to Disabilities. Now, I know that you think that, that's a bit like boring, but it's a really essential foundation that we kind of remind ourselves about the models of disability, language, like how we interact in that space and where all of that comes from as social constructs, and it impacts not only our work as practitioners, but then it helps us to be more empathic and aware when we're kind of supporting a person in behaviour support and they've got a really complex, broad team, all kinds of different people coming from all kinds of different spaces. So we've got a 30% discount on that, so jump in. And we're also going to offer someone today a free course, Introduction to Disability. So you just need to put your name and where you're from in the chat to be a part of that, and we'll do that draw at the end of today's session. A couple of other super exciting things we have coming up at PBS Together is we've got Robert Horner on a webinar on the 1st of May. So he's like the father of PBS, right? Like he's the coolest guy. And so we're really honoured that he's going to join us on the 1st of May. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And we've also a workshop coming up on functional behaviour assessment. We've been requested that a fair bit, and it's a really important area of our work. So look out for that too. So stay tuned for that. So Russ, over to you. Thank you so much. There'll be plenty of time for questions at the end, everyone.
Thanks, Tracy. Really appreciate that and the opportunity to share. Really grateful if you are here with us, either live or watching a recording. And yeah, like Tracy said, something I'm really excited to talk about and feel really strongly about. So I'm going to share my screen and get things going. All right. So before I kick off, I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians and owners of the lands on which I live and work, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and just recognise that the land was never ceded and that the processes and impacts from dispossession and colonisation are ongoing. And just want to recognise the unique connection to land, water and sky, and again, to acknowledge that myself and my family through my generations have benefited greatly through that dispossession, and just as a statement to acknowledge the need to move towards truth-telling and reconciliation. And so I'd just like to welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today, and to pay my respects to elders through time, recognizing that time is not necessarily a linear past, present and emerging thing, but that there is a different relationship to time as well. And so just to pay my respects to all elders through time. So today, if we're going to get stuck into some nitty-gritty learning objective things, we're wanting to identify and describe the school context. Now, working effectively with schools really comes down to having a really clear understanding of the school context itself. We have our role as behaviour support practitioners or as behavioural consultants, people that are being asked to go into schools to support a young person and to work with the teacher or teachers who are responsible for educating that young person. But it's a unique environment, school. It's a pretty funky, a bit of a weird environment. It's kind of an environment we've created that's like pretty arbitrary compared to some other places. You know, we sort of conscript people, we get them in, we put them in special clothes, and it almost sounds like uniforms, like prison or army service or something like that. But we have everyone going through school in some form here in Australia. And so it is a unique environment. And those environments create all sorts of different challenges or opportunities, as a nice way to reframe challenges there, for practice. But whatever it is, however we're viewing it, we just need to understand that context really, really clearly. And then we're going to explore ways to improve our effectiveness when we engage in school collaborations, working with teachers or other school staff. And I hope this is really practical. I hope if I don't get to anything that you can ask questions, but please also feel free to reach out if you've got other things as well. It's a fairly limited time we have, and we could talk about this honestly for days and days and days in terms of training. So I'm going to start out with the current environment, and this is a bit broader. Now, some people may be married to a teacher or partners with the teacher, or have family members who are teachers, and at Christmas you sort of, oh, how's it going? And they sort of hit you with all of the interesting complexities of school life. But it's important to know the current environment that people in schools, working in schools, are facing. So teachers themselves consistently talk about feeling underprepared to engage in behaviour support or to work with students around behaviour from their undergraduate degree courses. So this is something that's been a consistent theme for decades, really, that teachers are not trained or taught how to engage in these kinds of evidence-based behaviour support practices, to engage in the kind of thinking around why students do what they do that is linked with greater success and engagement for students. It seems like a bit of an obvious thing that we would look to address, but it's been a particularly resistant thing to change within university preparation courses. And so we're seeing teachers that are honestly, earnestly coming out of their university courses, maybe without the strongest toolkit in this. Now, it varies. There are some places that are doing it really, really well. There are some places where, it might be adequate. And then there are other institutions where teachers, pre-service teachers or undergraduate teachers, are telling us that they've been minimally prepared to do this work. Disruptive and challenging behaviours in classrooms are a problem. Now, this has sort of been pretty popular in the media. It's something that we like to talk about. Now, the actual extent of the problem is unclear. We don't have really strong sort of evidence on exactly what teachers are experiencing, the frequency or type of disruptive behaviour. But we do know that it is a challenge for within classrooms, and that teachers report this and students report this. And this might be part of those sort of conversations around the dinner table or over drinks with family or friends who are teachers, and they might be asking you straight away, "What do I do? What do I do? Help me out here." But it is a problem, and it's a challenge, and we'll talk a little bit more in a second about the impacts of that. It has really serious impacts on teacher wellbeing in the first instance. It has really serious impacts for the students themselves. We know that disruptive classroom environments are much harder environments to learn in. That's not exactly rocket science, but it's also something that has a greater emotional toll. It increases the stress levels of all of the individuals in the class, and it actually increases the likelihood that we're going to engage in reactive and punitive type responses. And if you think about this, it's a situation that's not great, but it kind of makes sense. We have teachers that haven't been prepared particularly well, who are facing pretty persistent challenges. And they don't always have to be the most extreme behaviors. A lot of teachers are not necessarily saying in the reports that we do have that they're facing the most violent or extreme sort of aggression or self-injurious type behaviors. But it might be a lot of really persistent lower level behaviors, a lot of disruption, calling out, swearing, those sorts of things. And they're dealing with this type of stressful behavior without that toolkit. And that might increase the likelihood of them using whatever is going to work. And that can be reactive and punitive type responses, even though those won't actually work in the long run. We know from the research evidence that those sorts of reactive and punitive types of approaches actually decrease engagement, they increase disengagement, flip side of the same kind of, other side of the same coin. And they also increase the likelihood of future disruptions and problem behaviors occurring in classrooms as well. So this is the current environment that we see. Further to that, the actual practical reality of teachers right now is there are shortages of staff. We're seeing grade splits, which is where we take like Russ teaching grade 6, which is what I used to teach. I was a primary school teacher, like Tracy was explaining. I did work in schools doing teaching things. And if I was sick, they would get a replacement teacher to come in and teach my grade. Now, currently, that's actually really hard to fill grades. And not every teacher who is sick or absent for any reason is replaced now. Their grade is actually broken up into smaller groups and spread across multiple other classes in the school. And so you can imagine if you're feeling a little bit unwell and you'll be making the decision about whether you're going to call in sick or not, you're really asking your colleagues in the school to look after and teach and manage the environment, their students and yours. You're asking them to look after a percentage of your class. So it's a really tricky environment in terms of grade splits. There's increases in the effects of absenteeism with teachers. We know that this kind of stress is likely to increase sicknesses and also people that will take leave or will look to leave the profession altogether. And so the environment right now is one of pretty high levels of stress and environmental complexity. And of course, if we're thinking here about the early slides around the environment in terms of the toolkit around the rates of behavior, and we're thinking about some of these practical things, these are all challenges that you're going to be facing when you go in to work with staff. And if someone's really stressed and they've been managing other people's students in their class, as well as dealing with the challenges of their own class, then it's not necessarily a really productive learning environment potentially for the teacher. So when I'm working with teachers, I view the teacher as the learner and the students are also learners. But the focus of our work today is really talking about teachers or education support staff as the learners within this environment for us. Our support is provided to them, and their work then supports our learners, the ones that we are engaged with outside of school hours. And so it's not necessarily a productive learning environment for the teacher learner in this situation. And if you think of environments for some of the people you might be supporting, one of the first things we're looking to do is make sure that everyone is safe and that we reduce the stress levels so we can actually engage in relationship building and skill teaching and seeing the benefits of our work realized within that safe and supportive environment. So part of the work straight away is about trying to reduce the impact of our involvement within this already stressful environment. Now, we'll talk practically about what this might look like, but it's definitely worth thinking about this. Now, you might already have questions, or you might have seen this yourself as you've been trying to engage in schools. This may not be news to you, but it's such an important point to come back over and view this environment. And of course, the implications of this are that we see, well, really variable implementation outcomes. We go in to provide our support. We might assist with planning, or we might talk about, communicate effective strategies that have been particularly helpful in home and community settings. And we get some good uptake in some instances. It might be some staff do it really well. It might be some schools across all of the young people we support do it really well. And there might be some schools that don't, or staff that don't do it particularly well at all. And so that kind of variability of outcomes is understandable given the environment. It's not what we want, but it is understandable. And the reality is that implementation outcomes in schools are really variable. And we also know that the outcomes of support, people like myself or maybe you going in to support teachers, leads to their own experience of the work. And this is on top of the current situation that I described before. So teachers actually report feeling that the interventions didn't actually fit their work, their toolkit, their skills. It was a mismatch. So there might have been matched to what the learner needed, the student learner, the person you're supporting, but it didn't actually match what the teacher was either able to do or the kind of work that the teacher has been doing to this point in terms of their values, or in many cases, it just was practically not possible for them to do either some or all of the components of the interventions that were described. So this is from a study by Squires and colleagues. It was published last year, and it's looking at board certified behavior analytics support in schools. And these themes, I'm happy to share the citation later on as a reading, but these match much of what we hear both anecdotally and in our work here in Australian schools with teachers. So the interventions actually don't fit. They don't fit the work, they don't fit the rhythm, they don't fit what they're trying to achieve in their classroom. Teachers often also felt blamed for the outcomes. And there's a difference between a level of responsibility and a level of blame. And I think much of this comes down to how we communicate and relate with teachers as we're talking through things like implementation fidelity, which is a really important part of our work, making sure that the interventions are implemented as intended with all of the moving parts. But when they're not, it's really easy for us to be like, oh, well, we're not doing it as we need to do it, which of course we may not have the intention of blaming teachers, but the effect of what we're communicating is really putting that in a way that teachers experience as blame. And also teachers reported feeling condescended. And some of this, I think, can be a product of the kinds of language and the gap between what teachers might have as their framework, their way of understanding and working with students around behavior, and where behavior science might be taking us, and the language we might use around that. And I talk with the students in our master's course about the gap between how most people talk and think about why we do what we do, behavior, and how some of these functional and contextual approaches to behavior, things like functional behavior assessment and the like, how they get us to think and talk about behavior. The worldview is really different. And the language is really different. If we're talking about antecedents, for example, some of this may be really unfamiliar to teachers. And there's a really fine line between being really clear and supportive and using our knowledge to explicitly instruct and provide the skills that teachers tell us that they don't have and really want, and doing so in a way that actually can leave them feeling condescended. Now, I actually don't think teachers are particularly precious about this. I think there is so much criticism of the teaching profession in media, and they are open to parent complaints. They're essentially the teaching workforce has been the end solution to every societal problem that we see. Young people are inactive. Let's get them more active in schools. We might have issues around democracy. Let's teach them about critical thinking and politics in school. So every sort of possible societal ill or woe is kind of being run through schools, and it's put on teachers a lot. And I think it's easy for us to say that they might be sensitive, but in actual fact, I think they have copped or borne the brunt of a lot of criticism and opinion broadly. And that's me maybe soapboxing a little bit. So I'll get back to it, but I don't necessarily think these are always just people who are being overly sensitive. And even if that is the case, it's really important data for us to pay attention to and work to avoid. And it sort of ends up, like I kind of summarized a lot of the findings around the teacher experience of support like this. I know I need help, but when and how and what is really going to shape the teacher's experience. When, because teachers are telling us they're really busy, and it has to fit within the rhythms of their work life. Like when I've gone in to consult with teachers in schools, and I did that as my day job within a Department of Education for about 8 years, I would try and work with the school principal ahead of time so that if they had a yard duty block, I wasn't talking to them while they were out on yard duty, that they were released from a yard duty so that they could sit with me and have a cup of coffee and we could talk about this in a space that they felt comfortable in. Now, again, this is all challenging when we have resource constraints as well. But the idea is teachers have a lot of work to do. They don't get to just put some of their duties down because we're there. And when we're talking to them as they're moving about their classroom, their attention is pulled in all sorts of different directions. And that can be a stressful thing as well. So when, how, and what we're offering as support is really, really critical. It is the difference between us supporting more consistently positive outcomes and experiencing more of those variable outcomes. So the overriding message, the thing that I'm like most keen to leave you with today, like if there's one thing you take away from this, it is this: don't suspend the rules for the adults. And I've said this, if this is not the first time you've heard me talk, you'd be like, okay, yeah, so he's a one-trick pony officially. Yes, I am. Don't suspend the rules for the adults. And by the rules, I mean, we're thinking about the behavior of the young people we're supporting as functional behavior. We're thinking about it as behavior that is in relationship to the environment, that it's not just inherent to this particular person we're supporting. It's not a product of their diagnosis or of their character or of anything like that. It is actually functional behavior that has been shaped, within environments. And sure, there are other personal and there may be sort of specific physical or other things that shape how they respond to their environment, but it is still learned in response to their environment. Let's apply that same thinking to the teachers. And what I mean is this: implementation in a school of a behavior support plan, of the supports that we're offering, is functional behavior. The teacher is engaging in functional behavior. Their behavior is functional and contextual. And that's why we take the time to talk about the context and the stress and challenges, the practical challenges of the context, because it will shape their ability to do certain things. It will change the relationship between the antecedents and consequences of their classroom environment and the particular behaviors we're asking them to do, which are the behavior supports. Again, thinking of the teacher as the learner. But it's really easy to miss this. Non-implementation is functional behavior. It's not a teacher that is necessarily wanting to throw away their value set or, deliberately trying to bury the interventions and supports and strategies that we're describing. Their non-implementation is still functional behavior. When we think about the people that we support, the young people, the children and young people who we're looking at their behaviors that we might describe, some people might call them challenging behaviors. Some people might describe them as maladaptive behaviors. There's lots of different labels that we put on the behaviors of our young people, but they are behaviors that are working for that young person given their current environments and given the skill set that they have. And so rather than, just view it in that way, we look to understand the relationship between the behavior that the young person's exhibiting and the environments, and make as many environmental changes as we can, and understand the young person's goals and aspirations and values, and build skills towards their ability to achieve that. Well, let's not suspend the rules. Let's understand teacher implementation as functional behavior, and let's understand teacher implementation or school staff non-implementation as functional behavior. We are not suspending the rules. And so ultimately, we need to understand that the environment is competently programming undesired outcomes. This is one of my favorite quotes in all of behavior science. It's the idea that this is not necessarily about a lack of competence, that we have to come and pour competence in. This is Israel Golddiamond's work. This is about an environment that is really clearly shaping the behaviors and responses of the adults in that space in the direction of outcomes that we would rather not be the case. I do want to say that we're not talking down about the adults, and we're giving the adults in the school, the teachers and education support staff, we're giving them the dignity of having complex responses to behavior. We're not treating them like children, but I would also hope that we don't treat the children that we support like children, if that makes sense. We know that they have complex aspirations. We know that they have goals and values, thoughts, feelings, emotions about the world. This isn't some black box thing where we don't take into consideration the things that people care about. Rather, we might just seek to understand what the individuals care about, the teachers care about, that our learners care about, and see how that may be influencing the different things that are happening in the environment. And I know that sounds really kind of abstract, but we'll talk really practically about that in just a moment. So if we don't suspend the rules, if we're thinking about teacher implementation as functional and non-implementation as functional, then our job is to understand what's going on and the environment and to construct. It's to build. Sometimes, and I was really guilty of this early on, I would see what a teacher was doing that we might say was punitive or reactive, and I would try and reduce that as a set of behaviors that the teacher was doing, and then increase things like the proactive sort of checking in, the environmental redesign and those sorts of interventions. But it was still coming across as, I want you to stop doing this, and I want you to do more of this. And now I actually think the most effective way to think about what you're doing is construction. You are not looking to reduce those things in the first instance. We do want to see them reduced, those punitive and reactive things. We want to see those reduced, but we'll get more by building on what is already working in the environment for the teacher. We'll get further by building on what the teacher is already doing within their practice that is good practice and is worth celebrating. And there is always something a teacher's doing that is worth celebrating and building on. So if we're not suspending the rules, we need to develop a process for implementation formulation, not just case formulation for our learner. We're formulating, we're thinking about the environmental arrangements of the school. We're thinking about the context of implementation, and we're formulating a way to increase the use of the things that will bring about a better case for outcome for our students, our clients. And what do those behaviors look like for the teacher? And then how are we going to make sure that within this environment, those skills or repertoires of teacher practice or education support staff practice can be increased? So that's what we're formulating now in a different way. And a process is really important because at my best, when I have had a really, really great night's sleep and I've managed to have my coffee and I haven't sat in Melbourne traffic for way too long just to go a fairly short distance, I can do a really, really good job just like off the cuff. But at my worst, I will do a really, really poor job just off the cuff. If I have a process that I can follow, that's going to enhance my best days and it's going to raise the bar on my low day. It's going to lift the floor on my practice. And so what do I mean by a process? Well, I would encourage you, and we don't have time to go into it now, I would encourage you to look at behavioral consultation models. And there are a number of consultation models that have been put forward, that have been researched, and it's worth thinking about the processes that actually structure the kinds of conversations that I'm kind of pointing to in dot point form today. The practical things that we need to do to ensure that we understand the context, that we are able to build effective relationships and identify the necessary challenges, both for the student that we're supporting and for the teacher that we're supporting to support the student. This always feels a bit Inception to me. It's like dreams within dreams. We're supporting this learner and we're supporting this person to support this person. But these consultation models really structure the process for us to engage consistently in our practice. Now, the degree to which each of them focuses on different elements of the process, I think, is up for grabs. It's not necessarily. I'm not going to say which one I think is best, and you might not have the resources to be able to spend months or weeks comparing and contrasting and creating this wonderful Venn diagram on Canva. You're too busy doing the work. And so I think it's just worth looking at some of the commonalities. And I've got some slides that summarize those sort of common themes that we're not going to be able to get into today. So if you do want to know more about that, please reach out. I'd be happy to share. But in practical terms, analyzing the environment really means looking at the school, and that's asking questions about what's happening at the school level. Are there any systems that we're implementing school-wide? Do they do something like school-wide positive behaviour supports, is what we call it in Victoria. Positive behaviour for learning, which is what we call it in Queensland, PB4L or PBL. And within the Catholic or independent system, it might be PBIS or PBL again as well. So it's actually worth asking, is there a school-wide system? So when you're going in to engage with the school, rather than think about what you're doing as supporting this particular learner, the teacher is working with that learner in the context of all their other learners. And there may be a school-wide approach that we are looking to embed our approach into or align our approach with. And so when you're analyzing the environment, it's worth taking the time to ask, are there any school-wide approaches to behavior support or well-being or culture development? They might be some of the language that is being used in the schools that I need to know about, that would be helpful for me to know about. And then it's being curious about those models, asking lots of questions. Early on, when I was going into schools, I thought, well, I'm coming in here, I've done my functional behavior assessment, I've got my plan written, and so the job is to upskill the staff to implement my wonderful plan. And some of my plans were really good. Some of them maybe could have been improved. But what I wasn't understanding at the time was that still had to fit. And in fact, a lot of what I was asking staff to do as part of the plan could have been aligned with some of the universal or tier one school-wide practices. Had I have taken more time to ask questions about what was being done for all students and how those universal practices might have been adapted to better meet the needs of the person I was going in to support. And so taking the time to understand the school-wide models or processes is such an important point to kind of align the work that we're doing. And again, it's constructing. We're not going in the absence of any practice of the absence of any kind of process or practice in the school. There'll be something there, and construction is always going to be a better place to start, building on what is already there. So then there's the classroom and the teacher. And so this is analyzing both their preferences, their style, the way they connect, and we'll talk a bit more about values in a moment, but also their routines. When is the best time to trial an intervention? When are they working with the students where it's most likely to succeed? And I think trialing interventions in times where it's most likely to succeed for the teacher is one of the most effective ways to build momentum on practices. Again, it's about construction. There might be a time in the week where we see the most frequent or significant behaviors of concern for the young person we're supporting. And yet that might not be the best time to be trialing the new thing. It might be, but that might require us to model that for a little while in the first instance. But yeah, starting at a time where it's really, really going to a high likelihood of success, high probability, just like we would with our learners, we're going to give them the best opportunities for success to develop the skills and build momentum, to contact reinforcement for the use of the new skill or the new practice. And then the system. I've got some slides coming up, but it's worth asking questions about this school. Is it part of a broader system? Is it an independent school that is not part of any broader system? In which case there might be fewer external resources from a central office to support the school to upskill or to develop. If it's part of a Catholic education system or another sort of Christian schooling system, there might be other supports and broader initiatives that are underway. And there might be resources that you can align your behavior support practice with at that system level. Hey, you know how your school is working on implementing X or Y as part of the, Melbourne Archdiocese of Catholic Schools, positive behavior for learning implementation effort or multi-tiered systems of support. This might sound like jargon to you, but it will make sense to some of the teachers you're working with. What I'm talking about with my supports for my learner, again, popping back between talking to you directly and modeling, what I'm talking about would sit here in the systems level change. What you're looking to implement within your school, what I'm saying is actually this here. So if you're aware of those systems level initiatives, it allows you to have that kind of, hey, what I'm saying is this, and you're already being asked to do this over here. So it's actually just more of the same sort of work, or I can actually help you achieve these school-wide or system-wide goals by working with this learner. That can be a really compelling point in your implementation supports. And so we're finding out, what are the school-wide systems? What are the routines and rhythms? And what are those broader systems initiatives? And some practical examples, and again, this is to drive alignment. The more this looks like, yeah, this is just how we do things here. There was a research paper from the sort of mid-2000s that was talking about braiding the initiatives of implementation, the things we're implementing, braiding them together to make a cord, show how they weave together to make that strong sort of thread of practice for teachers. Teachers get given new things every year. New things are discussed in media or proposed by people like myself in research spaces. Teachers should be doing X and Y, like I was saying before. And we can be overwhelmed, or teachers can be overwhelmed by the number of things they're asked to do that feel new. Or they can say, I've been here before. I've done this before. We did this in the 90s. We did this in the 2000s. And so what we're trying to show is, no, this is slightly different to those other things, but it's not necessarily another thing to do. It is just the thing to do. One of my sort of research heroes and sort of collaborators from the US, Dr. Brandy Simonson, she says this is not another thing on the plate. This is the plate. And so what we're trying to do is show the alignment between everything that they're being asked to do and the role of student engagement and well-being, and how evidence-based behavior supports actually align really closely with evidence-based instructional supports. They become sort of person-centered and student-centered. They are about enhancing what we can show alignment between things that teachers are being asked to do in other spheres of their work life and the immediate things for our student and the plan that we're looking to implement. And I would use the language of their system. So here's an example of a broader systems environment. This is a live, real example from the Department of Education in Victoria, positive classroom management strategies. And these are evidence-based and they're terrific. And we would hope that these would form part of the kinds of practices you would see happening in classrooms, but also the kinds of interventions and supports that we're looking to put in place as part of our plans. But it's not just Victoria. We see this in Queensland too. So there are some excellent, and these are open access. You can find the Classroom Management Hub and the effective classroom management practices just through Google searching. And it gives you language that you can use to translate the kinds of interventions that you're wanting to see for your learner into really teacher-friendly language. These are resources that have been designed for teachers. And you can just, I think it's a really important thing if we're going to make sure that teachers don't feel condescended to or don't experience condescension in our work, that we are speaking in a language that's familiar to them. And so these resources can be really helpful for you in translating the work that you're looking to do, and showing how it doesn't just benefit the student that you're supporting, that these are part of systems level and class-wide practices. So I'd almost bet our house on it. And, you know, we're in Australia, so that's Australian house prices. You know, that's actually no small thing. That if it's going to benefit your learner, it's going to benefit multiple learners in that classroom. If there's an intervention and practice that you're suggesting for your learner, chances are lots of other students in your classroom, the classroom that you're supporting, the teacher, it's going to benefit more than just that student. It will benefit more than just your client. So use common language and talk about the benefits of these universals. And I think that can be really helpful. So we're going to engage in implementation planning. And I'm going to wrap up pretty quickly because I do want to get to the questions. Implementation planning, and this is a process that you can use to avoid contextual interventions and plans that don't fit the context, and a mismatch between the values of the teacher and the interventions and practices that we're trying to get them to implement. We revisit teacher values. We engage in a values conversation with the teacher. What do they care about? Why did they get into education in the first place? I can tell you straight away that teachers are an altruistic group of people. They got into education for lots of varied reasons, but they're really values-driven people. They are caring, helping people, and engaging with them on some of those sort of values conversations can be a really, really great way to understand more about their heart for the work. And we can show how the interventions and practices that we're developing and supporting them to implement align with their heart for work. And it's also looking to, with implementation planning, do we actually understand? Do they know how to do the practice that we're asking them to do? Do they actually understand it? Could they show me? Could they demonstrate that? And making sure that we're seeing the goals of the classroom and the goals of our intervention aligning. These are conversations that we engage in directly with staff. And I think these final points down here around adapting interventions to make sure they fit. Hey, could you see, this is a conversation I would have with a teacher, could you see any roadblocks to you being able to do this? Like, would 15 minutes be a good time to start? Or how would you be able to collect data on whether you've been able to deliver that at the rate we need it? And it's like really having practical conversations. Like I'm less fussed about how it looks, provided that the core ingredients of our interventions are in place. If a teacher says, no, I don't like that as a way to go about it, I'm like, all right, it's on me to continue to think of a way to achieve that that matches the environment. In the same way that if what we're saying, we're asking the people we support to do something at home, and they say, I hate this, we need to listen to them. Otherwise, well, firstly, it's not going to be effective. But second, it might be effective and it would ruin our relationship. It might actually be a horrible experience for them. It might actually move them further away from their goals and experience. It might reduce their ability to be independent and autonomous. We might actually devalue them as a person. And so giving teachers the right to say no and the right to adapt practice is actually really, really important. And addressing barriers, openly discussing barriers, is not a problem. It's only a problem if we don't then do something about those barriers. And planning for solutions is a critical thing. And recognizing where we can find solutions and where those solutions are outside of our control, and where we can go and the kinds of resourcing we can access for teachers in order to address solutions in their school environment. And this is about, like, how we do this is the process of building and maintaining relationships. We don't wait until we have a relationship to have these kinds of conversations around values and barriers. Having the conversations around barriers and the values and adapting practices, that is how we build the relationship. If we do that in a way that is open and engaged and curious and showing unconditional positive regard for the teacher, giving them the dignity of engaging in functional behavior in their classroom space, we might be surprised at how they respond to us. It can be hard to put aside judgment, but it's really important that we understand that teachers are really being pulled around by their circumstances, and that quite often they're actually just, if they are demonstrating values that maybe don't reflect the kinds of things that I've put forward, that may have been a product of years and years and years of really difficult classroom circumstances and experiences. And they might have moved quite a way away from the initial values that they entered the profession with. So I'm just going to skip ahead to this question, and I'm going to leave with some simple things around language. I love asking this question of teachers. What do you think a good outcome looks like here? Sometimes I'm surprised by what teachers say. They might say something like that I'm out of here by 4:30 and I get to see my kids in the evening, that I'm not writing hours and hours and hours worth of behavioral notes. And that's fine. But understanding what the teacher views as a good outcome is a really, really important step, because it might not be the same as what we're hoping to achieve, like an increase in the use of a pro-social skill or a replacement behavior, or a reduction in a disruptive or challenging behavior. We might see those as our outcomes. We want to see a reduction from this or an increase in this. The changes in the behavior are what we might be viewing as a good outcome. But the teacher might be looking through that and beyond that and around that. And if we don't actually ask these questions and understand what a good outcome looks like for the teacher, and you can ask, what does a good outcome look like here? And they might talk about the student behavior. Then follow up. What does a good outcome look like for you personally? What would you like to get out of this process? And that gives us something else to build our consultation work on, to align the work with. And it gives the teacher, again, the dignity and respect of being heard as a professional, as someone that can, that not only delivers the intervention, but can stand to receive something, but is not judged in the process. So with interventions, I think it's worth building on teachers' goals and aspirations. I love, so you want to spend more time teaching? You don't want to spend as much time managing behavior? Great. Then that's going to be one of my outcome measures. And a reduction in, I want to always tie a change in the student's behavior to a change in the teacher's ability to do more teaching. And I think it's about really asking a lot of questions about what they've already done and why they think it hasn't worked. And asking that in a way that allows you to formulate plans. So thinking about it from an antecedent and consequence type of perspective. And building, teachers are always doing something well. It just may not be with the learner we're talking about. They might work over here with the shiny students that are really engaged and answering all the questions. Look at what they do well there. If we're wanting them to reinforce a student's pro-social skill use, they might do that a lot. They might just never do it for the student we're supporting. And it's much easier to reinforce good practice and to generalize than to construct something new. So if you're thinking about ABCs, and I really want to finish up here, some language that I've found particularly helpful for teachers when we're talking about antecedents and consequence is this idea of setting up and closing the loop. We hear a lot about triggers, but it's not always triggers in a negative sense. We're saying that antecedents, well, that's actually setting up. It sets up for good things as well as it sets up for things that we might want to see a reduction in. And the consequences, well, that just closes the loop. That is just the feedback or the reinforcement or the punishment, or whatever it is from that sort of psychological term sense. But for a teacher, this particular language has been particularly powerful, and they start to understand this idea of, well, I need to close the loop. If I don't close the loop will be closed by the environment out there, and it may not be in a way that we're happy with or that we would like to see. So it helps teachers see their active role in setting up and closing the loop, but it's also less judgmental language in, well, you're the antecedent. It's like, well, yes. So how did our instructions set up for the behavior we wanted to see? Okay, how did we close the loop there? It just changes the language from, well, it could sound a little bit more judgmental. So I'm going to finish there. I have more slides, but that's typical. I do have some great resources that I would recommend. I get no royalties or anything like that from these, but these have been books that have particularly shaped my thinking, how I engage. I really like the motivational interviewing for effective classroom management because of the focus on understanding values and connecting with the person that we're supporting. But they're all excellent resources. I'm going to stop sharing and hear from any questions.
People are shy on a Wednesday morning. You go, Hilda.
Can I start? Russ,
Yeah.
what a great presentation. I really love it. At the end, when you show us the way that we state the ABC, set up behavior and close the loop, I love it. I think it's always a big issue for us to try to speak clearly with our audience, with all the stakeholders in any situation. And I think that it looks really simple, the way to understand, and the fact that we need to close the loop, or the environment will do it in any other way. I don't think I ever heard something clearly as that, so I really love it. My question, I love a lot of things that you said, but just to start, you said about the importance of producing benefits for everyone, and describe a lot of things related to that. But I would love to hear an example of how it look like in practice, how it happens to the students that you are looking for, the other students, for teachers. Can you provide us an example of benefits for everyone?
Yeah, Howard, it's a great question. Quite often the benefits are, like I said, around the particular student's behavior. And the reason why I say that it's worth finding out what a good outcome looks like is, like, I've worked for in schools long enough that I've had situations where all of the graphs have gone in the right direction. The problem behavior graphs have gone down. The pro-social stuff, the stuff we want to see, have gone up. And I've gone, how great is this? And the teacher's gone, yeah, but I shouldn't have to teach this kid. I still shouldn't have to teach this learner. They should be somewhere else. And of course, I've got all sorts of questions about where that would be, and so a whole bunch of sort of social justice and values things around that. And so rather than deal with that at the end of the intervention where they've worked really hard, establishing benefits for the teacher, like, okay, well, you want to be out of here by 4 or 4:30. Well, let's just keep a bit of a record of not only the target behaviors that we're wanting to see increase and reduce, but also what time did you get out of here? Like, because there's sort of a creeping, like, things can improve and it can still feel like hard work. Like, if people are being called in to support young people in schools, odds are that this young person is going to be more work in a classroom always, that they're always going to have an additional level of need and preparation, that there's always going to be some level of increased frequency or dosage required in instruction. There's always more for the teacher to do. And so even when we see a really good outcome, it might still feel like more work for the teacher. And so having these other measures of success that relate to things that the teacher is identifying that they care about, alongside the changes for the learner, that can be a really powerful way. And so I think, measuring things like, okay, what time were we out of here? 5 o'clock. All right. Was it due to anything related to this particular situation? No. I got held up doing such and such. Okay. All right. So, are you finding there's less paperwork to do with this? But it's also being real about some of the investment on this. I use the sort of analogy of paying cash up front. This kind of work is paying cash up front. Teachers will pay for behavior in a classroom over time. We either don't make all the adjustments and don't do the work of sort of teaching the skill and prevention. And so, like, take something like non-contingent reinforcement, a student that has a really high need for security and connection and engages in behavior that we might label as attention maintained, right? There's either a lot of work in picking up the pieces of a classroom that's kind of blown apart by that level of attention demand, but that's longer term. That's like paying interest free. That's like going to Harvey Norman and buying the TV and the couch and everything else. No cash down, that's interest free, but you pay the price over time. Whereas if you actually invest in that, I'm going to, like, on a schedule of every minute, connect with this particular learner that has this really high need for connection and belonging, and I'm going to proactively go out of my way. Yes, it's going to feel really hard, like saving and paying cash for things. but it's actually going to save us in the long run. But again, it's that process of feeling really hard is actually made easier when we understand why we're doing what we're doing, which is the conversation around values. Values transform our experience of doing hard things. Like everyone that's watching live or the recording does hard things. Like people here that have done postgraduate study, people that have learned a language, people that have like got really fit, you know, run a 5K race or a 10K charity thing or a marathon, or you know, people have learned an instrument. Like they're hard things, but we tend to stick with hard things when we know why, when we know what we're working towards, and when we can understand that that sort of short-term experience of discomfort or sacrifice is actually in the service of something longer term that we really care about. And so having the conversations on the front end around what you really care about, what does a good outcome look like, and the values really can help us sort of accept, yeah, this is uncomfortable. I'm sweating. I'm working hard. I feel like a novice, and I've been teaching for 20 years, and I don't like that feeling. I want to escape it and just yell again. It's like, but that's actually not who we want to be. So it's about moving us towards the things we care about, even in the presence of a bit of discomfort, and showing the connection between the students' outcomes, the discomfort, but then the ability of the teacher to achieve outcomes as well. So I don't know if that's practical enough, Helder. I'm just really conscious of getting overexcited and talking.
Absolutely. Stuart asked for an example, and I think you just provide for us. If we have time by the end of the session, we can maybe have more time for other examples. Let's see other comments here. Rachel sent not a question, but I love viewing the teacher's behavior as functional, whether they are following recommendation or not. This is such an important reminder.
Yeah, Stuart, I have had some really, really good examples of success, and it's often come back to the time spent understanding both the needs of the learner, so that we can create that really effective plan, but then understanding the needs of the environment. And some of the things are like, I've just looked for the lowest hanging fruit. Like there was one specific example of a year 4 learner that had been engaging in some really, really, put it this way, the education support staff member had been seriously injured and was out on work cover, and the teacher had left on stress leave, and there was mediation between the family and the school, and and the student had been on a reduced timetable. They were down to 2 40-minute blocks in a week, and so it was a really, really kind of serious situation where it looked like it would be a difficult case to find success, because I needed buy-in from the school in order to make some of the changes. But we just working with a teacher who had been put in as a relief teacher for 2 terms to cover the rest of the year, and all they'd heard were all these horror stories about this class and this particular student. And so some of the lowest hanging fruit was an environmental change. Classrooms, particularly primary classrooms, have so many displays that are just hanging down everywhere. Like I walk in, I'm pretty tall, and I walk into them and I'm sort of like, you know, moving the octopus's legs out of their tentacles out of the way, and there's this, you know, everything's hanging down, and so I was just sort of talking about the impact of the visual stimuli. So we did things that only needed to be done once, and that might have a really, really high impact. So clearing the space, getting rid of the hanging stimuli, just like teaching break, and we saw within a month all of our defined behaviors of concern had gone to 0, and the student was up to a full day. And everything that we put in place, a full day every day, everything we put in place would fit into a universal intervention, even though they were labeled as a tier 3 student. And so some of the stuff that that had the biggest impact was pretty low, pardon the pun, hanging fruit. And so dealing with that first, I think led to a bit of success. It was not too hard for the staff to do. And once they saw success, they were more willing to listen to some of the other things. And so looking for effective impact with low-hanging fruit, once you've got a really clear understanding of the environment, is a really good way to approach the work. So I hope that answers your question, Stuart.
Yeah. Just in a message in 3 parts. Let's start first part here. New South Wales Department of Education has outlined a process that requires the child's guardian to meet with the principal and seek approval from NDIS, external therapists, to access the school. Often We are giving the admin email for the school, and they won't share teachers' principal details. Locally, this is being used to restrict our ability to enter the schools and voice the benefits of our collaboration, resulting in service just not entering the school. Do you have any suggestions for how we might best work with this barrier?
Oh, Josh, yeah. I mean, this is like, mate, all of this is fine if you get in, right? Like, and we do see this, we see it. Like ultimately, we need to be allowed in the room, and so I think it's just persistent, positive connection, and using where possible, the parents to advocate for that support. Parents have certain rights around the number of meetings that they, if a young person is diagnosed with a disability or has been identified as requiring additional supports, there are often sort of expectations around number of meetings, the types of work they're required to go around the support provided to them within the school as sort of a departmental minimum. And there's often an advocacy position, or the parent has obviously their own voice to advocate for the practices and outcomes for their own child, but then they can often have an external support. And so whether or not you can leverage that space or just make regular contact with the school leadership around, hey, just a reminder, like, we're here to help. We really hope things are going really well. It'd be ideal if things are just smashing along and everything's dandy. And if that's not the case, and there's any way that we can support you in your work and help you achieve the broader school system goals, please let us know. But yeah, you can't really force your way in. So I think it's without getting blocked as spam and a stalker, providing regular, gentle, positive sort of offers of support that align with the broader mission objectives for that school, making it clear that you can help not just with this particular young person, but in the broader work of the school. So that it's tough. That's not like a magic wand that I can wave, or I don't have a silver bullet.
I think that's another avenue in those kind of schools also is the P&C. If you're able to kind of offer, a free kind of, behavior kind of talk to the P&C, to all the parents, then you're kind of building a bit of credential and kind of getting in a bit of a softer way and not be so covert.
Yeah. We have time for, there is just a comment for the last question that we already have here. Love the focus on values, school vocabulary, alignment, and understanding the educator's perspective. Your insights from an educator's perspective made all the difference. Amazing. And we have a final question from Lucy. What strategies can be implemented to strengthen the teacher-student relationship and build a sense of belonging for students with disabilities?
This is a really good question, and so much of that would depend on what the teacher's already doing well and what the relationship is like in the first place. I think that point around building on the strengths of the teacher, it's like, look, there are certain things that teachers will be doing that are really, really good relationship building points of practice for other students in the room. And it's like, well, how do we just generalize that across to this particular learner? Like, what would a really subtle change be to this particular connection practice? And in some cases, it might just be that the teacher has had enough interactions that they view as negative, that they are not wanting to go over as frequently to the particular student. And it might be as simple as like starting with moving over and making a check-in contact more frequently. Let's increase it from like once every 5 minutes to, once every 2 minutes. And I might be generous in once every 5 minutes, right, Lucy? And it might be as simple as like, hey, how many smiles can you get from that student? Like, can you get a smile from them? And so much of this is helping the teacher understand that the relationship is not from the teacher's perspective, it's from the student's perspective. Like, and there's so many things that, like I think, and again, this is true for your work supporting the teacher. I think I'm helping. I go into a school, I'm like, here I am to help. And I just say this explicitly with teachers. I feel like I'm here to help, and I'm like, throwing a life buoy, like a flotation sort of, ring. But you might be catching a brick. From your perspective, it doesn't feel like a flotation device. It feels like a brick. I'm another thing in your calendar. I'm another person telling you you're not doing what you need to do. I'm another person telling you, like, inadvertently or accidentally, that you're further away from your values and goals than you even thought. And so being really clear that that experience is there for the student and for the, as it relates to belonging. Like, we may think we're doing a bunch of things that are building belonging, but they may not be experienced as increasing belonging. And so with your knowledge of your young person, what are some high leverage things that can build belonging? And sometimes it's like, actually, yeah, you got to talk about Magic the Gathering. Like, I know you don't want to, and I know you're tired, and I know your coffee's already like lukewarm on the way to cold. And the last thing you want is to have a minute. I'm being generous again, because it could be a 5-hour conversation about Magic the Gathering, but it's like, that actually is the point of connection. And maybe they don't need your check-in. In fact, you're actually going to ruin the relationship when they ask for space and you keep going and checking in. Like, your desire to care and create a sense of belonging might actually be inadvertently making things more complicated. So I don't know, Lucy, whether that actually answers your question. I certainly hope it does, but really it's about that sort of functional and contextual understanding, and then matching the needs of that environment. So once and you should know your person, and once you know your person, you can see what the teacher's doing well. It's about marrying those up, and emphasizing that it's about how the student experiences the interventions as it relates to connection, relationship, and belonging.
Mm-hmm. All right. We run out of time before we finish the session. Let me just share here. Let's see who is the winner of the Introduction to Disabilities course from today's session. Kelly from Cairns, congratulations. We'll get in touch. If you don't receive an email today from PBS Together, it was because we didn't find your email in our system. In this case, just send an email to together@PBS Together and let us know who are you, your email to contact you.
Congratulations, Kelly. and thank you so much, Russ. Like I said, it was such a great talk, very time limited, but there was so many like really key takeaways within that short talk, and just the reminder of the teacher's behavior is functional, and for us to understand the context of the school much deeper than we may normally do, and just see what they're doing well and adapt that, not just go in there and redefine and redevelop everything as if we're the superstars. So there are so many really great takeaways. Deeply appreciate your time and sharing your expertise, and I can see all the comments about how much people really valued everything that you talked to and shared about today. So thank you so much, Russ. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see everyone again soon. Take care, have a good week, and Russ has generously allowed us to keep the recording, and so it'll be on our YouTube channel soon as well. So look out for that if you want to kind of recap and try and capture some of those key takeaways that you might have missed. Okay, take care, everyone. Stay safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.